well, maybe a discussion, because I don't have a talk. Is everyone here now? Yeah, I haven't really prepared any talk, but I was just thinking about what I said, what I presented during the meditation about like archetypes. This whole thing of human beings seeing. It seems like we have a way of seeing the world that is not as in accordance with scientific facts as with narratives, and as seeing the world as kind of alive in a way. Seeing like I mentioned like the language example, feminine and masculine words, and I remember when I was a kid, colors had that significance as being boy colors and girl colors. And so it's not as simple as like we are just presented with something like a fact and then we process it as like a computer. It seems like there is some deeper things going on, and all cultures have used archetypes. Like it's quite a recent thing that we actually don't. Well, we have archetypes in movies and stuff like that still, but from what I gather as a non-expert, like all cultures have had like these really like stories that have been in common to their culture, and they have learned morals and how to behave in life through these stories, like stories in the Bible, like biblical stories, or we have the Norse mythology, and there are all kinds of mythology, and they seem to have a lot in common because they seem to be made like there's this kind of process where the stories that survive are the stories that actually bring something up, like in a different way. Like you can't, in a different way from telling somebody this is the way to do it, but then they create like this is the proper way to behave. Like just saying it flat out seems to be different from creating a story where you can identify with different characters and kind of intuitively know who's acting like properly as a human being. And to me, it's really fascinating how tantrics have actually used this quality and kind of turned this, like the dualistic mind, just flipped it around and letting it have a go at itself in a way, by like as I said, like we're approaching these deities as something else at first. Might seem strange, like they have anthropomorphic, they are anthropomorphic, but they often look very they can look very weird, frightening, and like these weird creatures, different colors. But it starts making sense when you actually start having the experiences behind this imagery, when you actually start becoming familiar with the different energies and see how effective it is to bring about the experience for us, like in our own bodies and minds, in our own experience, and through that letting those energies just consume like a like just have a go at our stuff. And it seems to automatically happen. Once the connection is made, you can just surrender to it, and it just seems to go deep and clear out what obscures our true nature. So to me, it's like the whole religious, what can seem like a religious aspect of Tantra. Like, if you remove that, I don't think Tantra would be as effective as it is. Like, then you throw the baby out with a bath water. Like, I don't think secular Buddhism. I think the idea of secular Buddhism is like it makes sense on a level, because we are in a society where we're kind of we've kind of been shedding these archetypical stories, replacing it with something else. But I think, to me, it seems like it's gonna inevitably fail, because we are not built that way as human beings. That's my opinion. I don't.
I think it seems still unclear though, the link between narratives that depict archetypes and the archetypal figures or archetypal deities. I mean, we're not telling stories about these deities. They are just deities. I mean, I don't really get deities, to be honest with you. I don't,
Well, like historically, they have been telling stories about these deities. Like, the sutras are, again, I'm not an expert on what I'm talking about right now, but there are stories of how I can't think of any stories about deities, actually, but at least with gurus, with Mahasiddhas, there are plenty of stories depicting different challenges in life, and how they have used challenges, their own circumstances, brought it onto the path, and through that realized Buddhahood. Like, for example, like a classic collection is the 84 Mahasiddhas, which depicts everything from like butchers to kings to prostitutes to like all kinds of different characters, and they all use, like, what they have in common is that they all find a way to use their own circumstances, transform it into clarity, and realize Buddhahood. So there are these like, traditionally there are these narratives that, because like a lot of these like these life accounts, biographies, they don't seem very realistic. If you like, they don't depict, well, I don't think they depict things literally, what literally happened. And for example, the life story of Padmasambhava, there are several different accounts, but they are dharmas written long after. So that's something that has been a story that has been revealed to someone and then written down. And dharmas have specific purposes for the human, like for transforming the culture, the present culture at the time that they were revealed. So they will use whatever virkemiddel, whatever means to achieve the transformation that needs to happen. But yeah, no, and going back to deities, if we look away from the narrative perspective, although it is related, it seems like the human way of living in the world, it's not as we don't approach things and see them as objects first and foremost. We see them in relation to ourselves in a way, and in relation to a lot of other things. So we don't process the world simply by facts and data and numbers. Like there's something more to it. And I think like my point with that for example in some languages they divide between like feminine and masculine words or feminine masculine colors, or people can have relationship with plants, I mean with other animals, you can even start loving a house, and you don't see that house then as just like it has like a meaning, a deeper meaning. So we see meaning in different things. And I think my point was just that it seems to me that the Tantrikas understood this and started using it for the purpose of enlightenment.
Yeah, but what you're saying is that, and that's what's given rise to the notion or the sort of justification for deity.
For the use of,
Yeah.
of deities in the way that they are used, yeah. Because we can actually form a relationship with compassion, which is difficult if compassion is just a fact.
But it's not a person. You know, we don't. I suppose we do have kind of, you know, evil characters in stories, and we have maybe I don't know, cruel ones, and sort of, and I guess in more modern narratives we have, you know, people who are, you know, wonderful minds, but perhaps a bit twisted in some way.
Yeah.
Whereas these are sort of quite isolated depictions of a particular quality. They're not the. You know, it's not easy to identify with compassion.
No, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. But they're isolated for the specific purpose of actually making the connection to pure compassion, so that we can experience that. Because of course, no human being is like one very distinct archetype. Like we're more complex than that, and people can have both compassion and hatred. Like some sort of beings. So I guess like the point is just that they are like they are representative of like a certain quality, but that quality can actually be experienced, and that's that's the main issue. Like if we just view it from the point that we have this abstract thing called compassion, and we make it into a person, and it doesn't really, and that's the only thing we do, then there is no, like that doesn't make sense. But if we do it to connect with what actually this, like with a very concrete energetic feeling or energetic vibe in the body, then to me it starts making sense why the system is built like that. But I think the way to understand deities is to practice deities. Like it's the only way to, or like understand Tantra in general. Even if you like I don't fully understand Tantra. I don't think you can get a full understanding of Tantra until Buddhahood. That's my personal, the way I see it now. But bits and pieces start falling in place as one progresses on the tantric path, in my experience. And yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I thought it was good the way you had the picture of fire before the meditation, because you could actually just look and see the form of compassion and the image of it, and it resonated.
Yeah, I mean that's why we
Yeah.
like there is no other purpose than to tankas they're called, or statues, than to actually invoke the energy of those beings as non-physical beings. And like it's the basis for visualization as well, because it seems that our minds cannot distinguish very well with what we see with our eyes and what we see in our mind, and this is used in idrett. Yeah, sports and athletic stuff. Like athletics use it. Athletes use it like mind training, like visualization, to perform better. And they use these virtual reality glasses to treat phobias, for example, like arachnophobia or fear of heights. So that's another point with actually being able to have a form of compassion that we can actually visualize, and it just affects the mind because the mind seems to work that way.
I think we can also use when vipassana, the archetypal energy like compassion. What would compassion do in this kind of situation where I am at that point, and what would be the loving resolution, wisest resolution, or is there some kind of tool to wisdom, understanding what is happening? And you can ask for guidance for archetypes to understand the situation largely.
Yeah, it seems like our minds work that way as well, that we can actually receive answers from compassion in the form of when we cultivate it as a form, as a being. But yeah, it's not like the what would compassion do. It's like the what would Jesus do in Christianity. But I think it does have a bit of a pitfall if you start projecting what I think. There are many answers to what would Jesus do, but I
Brave people too. That is also
yeah.
bravery or
Brave to do.
just let your own desires to dissolve and do the thing what is right to do for all in the situation.
But the
Sometimes
thing-
you have to
but
face the fear.
Yeah, but the thing that's right is not necessarily brave. See, this is the problem I have with archetypes. They're not nuanced enough. And whereas characters are. Characters are, and they relate better to, the difficulties we face. We often face difficulties where we look bad, but actually it's the compassionate thing to do. And it's exploring that. Whereas if you have someone that's compassionate, I suppose, yes, you could evoke that, because the compassionate thing to do in that instance is to maybe say, no, I'm not doing this.
Of course, you can set boundaries also. Set boundaries of your existence with help of the power of the archetype to understand why you are behaving like not a good, like starting to be a parent to your inner child or something.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I understand what you mean by them being narrow, but I think it's kind of missing the point, because, like, first of all, like we don't only practice one deity, like so we practice a range of deities, and especially like we have in open heart yoga actually like a mantra that combines these into a more like into a whole, as in WHOLE. And we also practice the gurus, which are more complex beings. But I still see it as very useful to have these, to be able to tune into very fine details, because they become then details of the natural state, so that because different different situations, different parts of the path, different karmic makeups might need somewhat different things. It's like well, I can't figure out a good metaphor, but it's like just applying like the very specific medicine sometimes, and then like a more general health tonic other times.
Yeah, I think I can see that, you know, at times I lack of courage, so maybe involved with some sort of courage might be helpful in my case.
Yeah, I mean, what came to mind is like we're trying to get to know our true nature, our Buddha nature, and I just thought that's sort of, if you take the analogy of light, like white light, and you put it through a prism, like so it splits up into all its different colours. So each colour could be the characteristic of the natural state, the light, the full light, but you get to know each constituent part of the light better through studying each colour, as it were. So it's just a question of becoming more familiar with who we are in our natural state. It's not trying to be something, it's not trying to be more brave or trying to be more this, but to understand who we are naturally, so we can become.
Okay.
Because this isn't specific to Tantra either, that you actually divide it into different parts, like the what are they called, divine abodes, or divine abodes,
Yeah.
like what are they? That's equanimity, joy, compassion, and loving kindness. Yeah. Well, the point is, like, even if I got it wrong, the point is that in those practices, you do try to go into specific, like more into the details of the natural state. But I just think Tantra is a better way to do it for human beings. That's like, because you can actually then relate to a form. And we see forms.
And I really would say that it's about the experience. It's the way it seems to me. It's not something that is possible to explain, or it's not something that is possible to understand.
Okay.
I have no clue, but I'm just trying to be open to the experience, and it seems like I get something from it. So it really maybe something unexplainable. explainable and something you just kind of have to try it out if it feels right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's for all. Like for all, not because some are better than others. Just the general makeup of. Like I remember when I found Tantra, so I'd been looking for different kinds of things, dabbling with the idea of God, and but it seemed too abstract for me in a way. Like I didn't know how to direct devotion to that. But, this wasn't perhaps very conscious at the moment, but I've thought about it later. But when I found Open Heart, and actually back then it was Maciej Globdron, which was the main guru, it felt like it just fit right in that hole where like the whole of where to direct my devotion. So it fit very well for me, but it might not fit for others, of course.
I think it's related to the structure of everyone's structure. There is a one story. It tells about how we need sometimes we have creativity, but we also need sometimes to recover so we can be creative again. And those two have they are two archetypes in there. Okay, there is a archetype of creating, and there is archetype of nurturing to creativity. So there is you can imagine that there is a old man struggling to the woods, old, hairy and long beard, and it's devastated. I have done so much, and I have created this. Went away and just and finding a way to the cottage, and there's an old lady which is really really compassionate, and it takes the old man into her lab, and pedaling is it's everything is okay, everything is okay, everything is okay, and she does that the whole night, and morning the old man is the little baby boy and new again, and he is running through the door and all creative again. That is the part of our mind to, and sometimes in our culture we are in that old man just traveling because we don't do that recover work. Mm-hmm. So we must understand that now we did the Avalokitesvara, which was the recovery and feeding, and we can, when it's its purest form, we know that it's true in that, and we can be that kind of flow to feed to everyone, and be everything is okay. So that's your story.
Yeah.
It's in some book. It's called Woman's Walking with Wolves, and there is a Spanish woman. Yeah, then they are studying the native stories, and there's archetypes. That is the one story, and that book is really good. Mm.
Because I think when you break it down a bit further, I mean, every story has, a hero and I guess a villain and so forth, and essentially that's what they are. So essentially, you might argue that the hero is Avalokiteshvara in this case. Now he may be disguised or clothed in sort of more normal kind of engagements with life. He may be slightly cruel, he may be slightly distracted or whatever. But essentially, when it comes down to it, he does the compassionate thing in our story, in our imaginary story. And so that's a way how we can identify with this guy. So our stories are a way of identifying with what's the right thing to do. So maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
can I say something? It's just like I think the point with these deities, I think kind of making it too complicated, like who's the hero and all of that. It's more like there is compassion within us, and that is hidden, and then we have to figure out a way to reconnect with it. So that's all it is. Like that's all Avalokiteshvara as a method is to reconnect with what is already there. And I think that it seems to me that why some people don't connect, like this isn't a moral judgment, like a value judgment, but that there is not readiness for that kind of practice. So other things need to be done first in order to actually be attracted to the deeper meaning that lies behind these forms. Like to actually get to the point where you can experience how brilliantly effective it is as a method, because it has a somewhat strange form if you just look at it on the surface. But yeah, I wouldn't get lost in like the trying to figure out where they place in where the different deities are placed in the narrative, in a story, or it's just a way to reconnect. And if we only had like this might be a little besides the point, but also with like wrathful compassion, there are archetypes so that we can kind of feel the difference between compassion and wrathful compassion, because they're essentially the same, but their expression is somewhat different. Because we are talking about enlightened archetypes, and in our stories, or in most stories, there is a mix there. Like there's mixed characters, but you can still recognize them as archetypes. So Tantra and I don't think Tantra and for example the Norse mythology, that it doesn't serve the exact same purpose, or just the like movie archetypes, or like children's stories. It doesn't serve the same purpose, because those are more presenting more samsaric archetypes, a little bit good, a little bit bad, in different proportions.
Pure value, not the pure value.
Yeah. But we're using the same principle for enlightenment purposes. The same faculty of mind that is able to identify other characters and relate to characters, because it's that relation that makes the connection. Yeah, any other comments before we take a break? we can. So it's 4 o'clock now. So we have another hour off, and then I think we will practice a little bit more, and then we finish. And yeah, you can